Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. President Trump threatens BRICS countries with 150% tariffs, accusing the bloc of trying to destroy the US dollar.
Our other headlines: the European Auto Manufacturers Association tell us United States trade tariffs will crash Europe's car industry.
It is opening up markets, not closing down markets, that has been the recipe for success.
Shares in Alibaba jump as the e-commerce giant announces an aggressive push into artificial intelligence. Plus,
Bond. James Bond.
007 shaken and stirred. Who's the world's most famous double agent really working for now? President Trump says he's threatened BRICS countries with a 150% tariff.
Trump claims the emerging markets group, which includes China, Brazil and South Africa, wants to replace the US dollar as its main trading currency. While BRICS has floated an alternative currency idea, there is no solid plan on de-dollarization.
Let's talk to our correspondent Nick Harper in Washington. Nick, where did all of this come from?
Well, Jamie, it's a little strange that Donald Trump is speaking about it now. We do know that the 10 BRICS countries have discussed this, the possibility of introducing a new currency, really to try and reduce their reliance on the dollar, either using one of their own currencies or creating a brand new BRICS currency. However, all of these plans have never come to fruition, and just last week, Brazilian officials essentially said that the idea was dead and it had never reached any formal stage where they talked about the potential mechanisms of this currency. However, Donald Trump has brought it back into the spotlight. Last week, he was threatening 100% tariffs on the BRICS countries, and then on Thursday, at a Governors Association meeting in Washington, D.C., he spoke about the possibility of a 150% tariff and said that the U.S. would not do any business with any of the countries. He maintains that that new BRICS currency that hasn't come to fruition would undermine the US dollar. He also went on to make an extraordinary claim, saying that the BRICS had broke up. We haven't heard from the BRICS states lately, he said. But perhaps in many ways it's not that surprising when you consider the countries that are part of this grouping and the fact that the US has somewhat rocky relations with many of them, with China, with South Africa and with Iran. And therefore Donald Trump suggesting more tariffs, as he likes to do, is a common theme, even though this actual currency that he seems to be targeting hasn't come about.
And this isn't just bluster, is it? Trump's tariffs are being taken seriously. The threats are being taken seriously. South Korea recently asking for an exemption.
Yeah, you're right, Jamie. I think we are seeing this manoeuvring from many countries around the world, trying to speak at the top levels of government between the US and their individual countries to try and escape these impending tariffs. Now, these are a different set of tariffs that the South Koreans have been talking to Washington about. In particular, the steel and aluminium tariffs, 25% on those, and the reciprocal tariffs, which would be a country-to-country basis. Now, respectively, they're due to come in at the middle of March for the steel and aluminium tariffs, and then around the beginning of April for those reciprocal tariffs. Now, the Trade Minister of South Korea has been in Washington this week, really laying out a case as to why he believes South Korea should not have these tariffs imposed, and in particular highlighting an existing free trade agreement between the two countries, also highlighting the current low import duties that are placed on American goods. It's just at 0.79%, and that tariff level is expected to fall even lower over the course of the next year. And the South Koreans also making the case that they have invested very heavily in the US in recent years. In 2023, it totaled $21.5 billion worth of investments, making South Korea the top global investor. So plenty of manoeuvring, plenty of petitioning. However, no word yet, Jamie, as to whether those petitions have fallen on deaf ears or whether it's something that the US is happy to work with South Korea on and remove those tariffs from that particular country.
Nick, thank you. Our correspondent Nick Harper in Washington.
Donald Trump's controversial remarks and executive orders targeting his allies have shaken presidents and prime ministers around the world. But it's ordinary people who are likely to pay the price of trade tariffs. Our Washington correspondent, Owen Fairclough, reports.
Semiconductors and microchips are the driving force of modern life, and now the next front in Donald Trump's new trade war. The US president on Tuesday confirming they're likely to be included in a new wave of costly tariffs that are already defining Trump's second presidency as it marks its first month.
Have you decided specifically what the auto tariff rate should be?
Yeah, I probably will tell you that on April 2nd, but it'll be in the neighborhood of 25%.
What about semiconductors and pharmaceuticals?
It'll be 25% and higher, and it'll go very substantially higher over a course of a year.
So far, Trump has hit China with tariffs, but postponed them for Canada and Mexico until early March while they negotiate. Add to that, there's blanket duties on steel and aluminum, pharmaceuticals and semiconductors that will impact just about any commercial partner of the US. Semiconductors and microchips have huge strategic value to the US as it competes with other tech leaders such as China to lead in artificial intelligence and the most advanced products. Leading US business organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce say tariffs will backfire on consumers with higher prices, just as inflation is starting to rise again. But the chief executive of US steelmaker JSW Auto says one of his plants now plans to add 100 jobs due to the protection tariffs will offer from cheaper foreign competition, one of the Trump administration's motives for waging trade conflicts. And yet for a president fixated on ratings, a new poll out on Wednesday showed that while Trump's overall popularity has declined only marginally, opinions over his handling of the economy have taken a much bigger dive. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Well, the electric vehicle industry is caught up in this tariff trade war. President Trump's tariffs are causing concern right across the European car industry. Juliet Mann spoke to Ola Kalenius, the president of the European Automobile Manufacturers Association.
It is very difficult to foresee what the results will be of negotiations in all directions between the US and the EU and China. What we are saying as a strong global automotive industry and the European automobile companies are the true global champions with a footprint in all regions. We're invested in the United States. We're, of course, invested in our home market in Europe, but we're also deeply invested in China. Our wish towards policymakers is to take a step back and look at what has made us successful, what has created jobs, created growth, created tax revenue. Much of that has happened in the last 30 years with opening up markets. So let's not forget about that. Make the playing field level, no question, and where there are issues to be addressed, that's legitimate. But let's not forget what the recipe for success was.
The CEO of VW's Seat brand said this month that any additional tariffs on China-made EVs are going to cause that collateral damage to European companies and to European jobs. What's your take?
The Chinese supply network, or rather the global supply network, is so interconnected that building a wall in any one direction can create disruption and unwanted side effects. So what we need to do is to look at the supply chains, of course make sure that the playing field is level. I don't think anybody's arguing with that. But be thoughtful when we craft trade policy.
And of course this year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the EU and China. You've been talking to China's Commerce Minister, Wang Wentao. What's the outlook then for European car makers in China?
The Chinese car market, I think, probably is the most competitive car market in the world now. One of the reasons is so many new entrants. It's like 100 companies plus that is vying for this market and also vying for the new EV market. We have every opportunity to partake in that competition. And I think the recipe for success, if you want to be one of the winners in that game, and that is what we're doing at Mercedes-Benz, is you need to double down on what the Chinese customer is looking for. So if you have adjustment to be made to your products to better cater for the Chinese customers, do that. Do it on location so you can quickly react to what the market needs, for instance, in the digital space. we have built up a significant R&D team in China for China to be able to react to the market, but also take advantage of the cost structure that you have in China. There is nothing impeding us from doing that. So in my meeting with Minister Wang, we talked about that. We said very clearly our intent to increase our investments in China, but also to say to him and his European counterparts, you're in a trade dispute right now. It was started by the EU. See if you can find common ground.
Shares in the Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba jumped more than 14% after it announced plans to invest aggressively in artificial intelligence. The group, which is dual listed in Hong Kong and New York, said it will spend more on cloud and AI tech in the next 3 years than in the past decade. Alibaba reported an 8% rise in fourth quarter revenue to more than $38 billion. Our correspondent Mitch McCann joins us now from New York. So, Mitch, a very significant announcement from Alibaba. What's happening in New York?
That's right. Good morning from New York. If we take a live look at the New York Stock Exchange, Alibaba's stock price is up 5.91% this morning here in New York. So a strong start to Friday, with the markets having only been open for an hour and a half. And if we look at its performance in New York over the past month, it's up around 68% as well. So a strong performance for Alibaba. Very positive news all round for the e-commerce giant, with profits surging around 239% for the December quarter. This figure beat analysts' estimates, and the primary reason, it says, for the growth is the business's cloud computing sector. The company's chief executive told analysts that the company is looking to continue its success by aggressively investing in AI and cloud computing over the next 3 years. Eddie Wu said, "We are excited by the business opportunities being unlocked by this new technology cycle." So good news all round for Alibaba.
And it's not just Alibaba, is it, Mitch? Goldman Sachs predicting a big investor windfall for Chinese AI, pegged mainly to the success of DeepSeek.
Yeah, that's right. A significant amount of money. Goldman Sachs says it expects Chinese stocks to attract $200 billion because of the success of Chinese AI, as you say, driven by DeepSeek, this AI app that was released in recent months, and it has drawn huge international attention. As a result, Goldman Sachs have bumped their targets on China's CSI 300 stock market index, which, according to reports, they believe will result in a 19% return from current levels. Goldman Sachs is suggesting some caution, though, adding that as promising as AI could be to China's growth, we believe forceful policy stimulus is still required to address deep-rooted macro challenges and drive sustainable equity gains. But all in all, predictions of a big windfall in China from Goldman Sachs as a result of AI.
And a third story, if you will, Mitch. Amazon, for the first time, overtaking Walmart in quarterly revenue results.
Yeah, that's right. Since 2012, Walmart has been the top revenue generator each quarter. However, the company has now been overtaken by Amazon, who said its fourth quarter revenue was $187.8 billion compared to Walmart's sales of $180.5 billion. So still a lot of money for both companies. Amazon's core revenue generator is still its retail business, but it's reported that its success is also now being driven by its cloud computing and its advertising and seller business. We reported yesterday information from Walmart. The company said it expects sales to slow in the coming year as American consumers face the uncertain impact of tariffs and a potential rise in unemployment. So more discussion of tariffs here in the United States and the impact on retail spending.
Right, and we'll have a bit more on Amazon a bit later in the show and its links to a certain spy. Mitch McCann in New York, thank you so much.
Apple has removed its data security tool from British users following a dispute with the UK government. Advanced data protection uses end-to-end encryption to stop anyone but the account holder from seeing private photos or documents. But the British government asked for the right to access that information. Apple said it could create a way for bad actors to get hold of users' data. The tech giant says it's disappointed it can no longer offer security to UK users. UK retail sales increased nearly 2% in January, beating expectations. That figure was mainly driven by an increase in food sales and demand for tobacco and alcohol. Analysts say the cost of living crisis means more people are shunning restaurants and opting to eat at home. The number of job advertisements in the UK rose for the first time in 7 months in January, in a sign that employers are coming back to the jobs market despite a slow economy. Total active job postings rose to 1.52 million. That's up more than 7% from a sluggish December. Headline inflation in Japan has risen to its highest level in 2 years. The overall rate hit 4% in January, driven by fresh food and energy prices. The price of goods and services has outstripped the central bank's inflation target of 2% for the last 3 years. Policymakers have hinted at more intervention if prices do not cool.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Ukraine's president tells the United States he needs clear security guarantees before a peace deal with Russia is reached.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Hamas has named the 6 Israeli hostages it'll release on Saturday. Israel is accusing the group of violating the ceasefire over the release of the bodies of 4 captives on Thursday.
It says forensic tests showed that the remains of Shiri Bibas were not included in the return. Hamas says the body appears to have been mixed in with others recovered from under rubble.
Our correspondent Jonathan Regev reports now from Tel Aviv.
The reaction is one of shock, of anger, nothing short of that. Israelis do not believe the excuses coming out of Hamas about the confusion regarding the bodies. Israelis feel that this is part of what is defined here in Israel as psychological terrorism done by Hamas. This is how it's seen here. This is how it was also presented by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a short statement. He made this morning very big anger. Even the definition for Hamas is body traffickers. That's how they're defined here in Israel. Even when it comes to bodies, Hamas is basically trafficking and lying, whatever you call it. This is how things are viewed here in Israel. And of course, Israel demands to have the body of Shiri Bibas as quickly as possible. This is part of the agreement, and there's now been a breach of the agreement. This is how Israel is looking at it. Israel has also vowed to react with force. But having said that, Israel will clearly not do anything before tomorrow. Why so? As you said, 6 more living hostages, the final remaining hostages of the first phase, are meant to come back Saturday. Therefore, at least until that happens, we will not see any major reaction from Israel. After that, it is not exactly clear. There will still be another 4 bodies that are meant to be released next Thursday, and that will mark the end of the first phase. So along with the anger, for the moment, not a major reaction from Israel, as all the anticipation is for the 6 hostages that will be released tomorrow.
And Jonathan, we should say this is all part of the first phase, but the next phase of the ceasefire is looking rather fragile, isn't it?
Fragile to say the least, Jamie. The negotiations for that second stage, which were due to begin some 3 weeks ago, have not really begun. Yes, there were some negotiations. A low-level delegation traveled to Qatar, and Netanyahu holding the talks in Washington. But was there a real negotiation? The answer is no. And if you ask the Israeli far-right leaders, they're saying that everything that has been happening in the past 24 hours, that the fact that one body that was returned did not belong to an Israeli hostage, the fact there was an attempt to blow up buses this morning, all of this shows, according to Bezalel Smotrich, to Itamar Ben-Gvir, according to them, this shows that there's no room for negotiations with Hamas, and Israel should go back to fighting. And I have to say that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is well aware of that. He's also well aware of the call by the public. Most Israelis are calling for the agreement to continue to bring back as many more hostages, especially the living ones, to bring them back. But it seems as if for the moment there's no real progress in the second stage. If you ask most Israelis, they would still want to see the hostages back and the agreement continuing, but most of them also do not believe that it will happen, eventually thinking that the return to war is a much more probable event than the continuation of the agreement into the second phase.
Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Well, let's get the picture from Gaza now with our correspondent there, Rami Al-Maghari.
Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip are expecting the release of more than 600 Palestinians. Palestinian prisoner. This is the largest number since the first phase of the ceasefire deal was announced, and it's still going on. Yes, next Saturday there will be the release by Hamas of 6 Israeli hostages. 3 of them will be released from Rafah city, the battered Rafah city, the destroyed one, and the other 3, as stated by Hamas, will be released from the central Gaza Strip refugee camp of Nusayrat refugee camp. That's the statement by the Hamas's authorities, or the Hamas's body here in Gaza. Yes, the Palestinian people are expecting that number of people, of Palestinians released from Israeli prisons following the release by Hamas of the 6 Israeli hostages. This will mark the end of the first stage of the ceasefire, and let us mention here that in terms of the supplies that need to enter the Gaza Strip, only 15 mobile homes have entered the Gaza Strip out of 60,000, the number needed for the population of Gaza who have lost their homes during the Israeli war on the territory for the past 15-16 months. This number constitutes some kind of a violation, according to the Hamas-run government office, that has stated that this is a sort of a violation of the ceasefire agreement with Hamas, between Hamas and Israel, mediated by Qatar, and this puts the ceasefire on risk. Actually, it seems to be a fragile ceasefire, as Israel has already hinted that it wants to extend the first stage of the ceasefire deal.
Well, leaders from Egypt, Jordan and the Gulf states have gathered in Saudi Arabia to discuss their own post-war plan for Gaza.
The meeting is being held behind closed doors, but the talks are expected to centre on finding an alternative to President Trump's plan for the region.
Our correspondent Yasser Hakim is in Riyadh. Yasser, what will the leaders be discussing specifically?
Yes, the meetings have ended in the last hour, Jamie, and there was a statement coming out saying that it was an informal meeting where they discussed Palestine and the issue in Gaza. Without details, but we know from before, from the sources at the meetings, that Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has presented the counter-proposal to U.S. President Donald Trump's vision on Gaza, and the Egyptian proposal, which should be the Arab proposal, is about reconstruction without displacing the Palestinians. It will be over 3 to 5 years, and it will include international construction companies. The Palestinians will be located into 3 safe zones in Gaza throughout the period of the reconstruction, and there will be a police force, Palestinian police force, with the help of Egyptian personnel as well and Arab personnel, will be working as the police force in Gaza, and that Hamas will no longer be the governor of Gaza or the leader of Gaza, but probably the Palestinian Authority. It's not yet confirmed, but probably it will be the Palestinian Authority that will be ruling Gaza during that period. At the same time, there is also a donor conference that they will be calling for, an international donor conference, to finance the approximately $53 billion of constructions needed according to the UN figures. They also talked about how to work hand in hand on a lasting peace process, whereby, according to the UN resolutions and international law, that there will be a 2-state solution with East Jerusalem the capital of a Palestinian state. So all of this has been discussed in the meetings. However, any resolution or any final agreement or statements will only come from the emergency Arab League meeting that will take place in Cairo on the 4th of March, because this is the official Arab League summit that will take place. The teams that, or the countries that met today in Riyadh are the ones who are actually directly involved with the Gaza conflict, whether Egypt and Jordan, because they are bordering the 2 sides and they'll be affected by it, whether Saudi Arabia, using its clout and its ties with the U.S. President Donald Trump to try to push him to agree to this, Qatar having its influence on Hamas, and the United Arab Emirates with the Abrahams, one of the countries that have signed the Abrahams Accord and has good ties or close ties with Israel. So this team, and obviously the rest of the Gulf states, who will be basically funding the Gaza reconstruction. Most of the funding will be coming from the Gulf countries who are present today. So this is basically a prelude to the Arab League meeting, and obviously we know that the draft resolution by Egypt, the draft plan by Egypt, will be also delivered to U.S. President Donald Trump. Back to you, Jamie.
Yasser, thank you for that. Our correspondent Yasser Hakim in Riyadh.
Ukraine's president says he called for reliable and clear security guarantees before a peace deal can be struck with Russia in a meeting with President Trump's envoy.
Volodymyr Zelensky said talks with Keith Kellogg in Kyiv were productive and gave him hope for future negotiations. This comes amid escalating tension between the United States and Ukraine. Our correspondent Stuart Smith reports now from Kyiv.
Well, he said that they needed strong agreements with the United States. Kyiv's still interested in working with the United States, despite the online barbs exchanged earlier. And Volodymyr Zelensky saying that it's important to have that strong agreement to ensure that the war never returns, either for Ukraine or for Europe more broadly. He also spoke about this economic agreement that he is trying still to get with the United States. It's not clear what those details are, but reportedly progress has been made and could even be be signed before the end of the week, but that is not confirmed at the moment. So President Zelensky stressing the importance to work with the Americans, and until just a few hours ago we hadn't heard Keith Kellogg, the special envoy's version of events, but he has posted a brief message on X, the social media platform, saying that he had extensive and positive discussions with President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's the first time we've heard from him since yesterday. The press conference that was due to take place afterwards did not in the end go ahead due to reportedly Washington's concerns. Keith Kellogg said he was there to listen, which may be one of the reasons why he was not keen to make any statements after that. But he praised President Zelensky's team, saying that they were a group of national security experts, and also he called President Zelensky courageous. Now, after those meetings, the President of Ukraine called other European leaders, the Finns, Norwegians, Canadians, also the Croatians, to brief them on what he had said. And perhaps most importantly, he said he had a long and very substantive conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron. He's one of the only two European leaders that are already committing to sending troops to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire, if it's amenable to Washington and if it's amenable to Moscow, and both of those leaders heading to Washington next week. So President Zelensky sounding confident online, saying that he has coordinated his position with France and they have joint plans and next steps prepared.
You can get the highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. You can sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, will Germany turn right? The far-right AfD is on track to make significant gains in the election this weekend.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN. What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories. President Trump threatens BRICS countries with 150% tariffs, accusing the bloc of trying to destroy the US dollar. Shares in Alibaba jump as the e-commerce giant announces an aggressive push into artificial intelligence. China says it supports the United States and Russia on a path to peace in Ukraine. That's the message from China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, attending the G20 meeting of foreign ministers in Johannesburg. Wang met his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, at the conference. He's also had discussions with Turkey's foreign minister and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Germany heads to the polls on Sunday against the backdrop of political turmoil. So who are the candidates hoping to become the next chancellor? Well, the Christian Democratic Union, or the CDU, is polling as the front-runner, led by former asset manager Friedrich Merz. The party is proposing to cut taxes, tighten welfare, slash immigration, process asylum claims abroad, and boost aid to Ukraine. Chancellor Olaf Scholz leads the Social Democratic Party, or the SPD, which aims to support low-income families by cutting VAT on food and raising the minimum wage. It wants to curb immigration and has also proposed a $100 billion infrastructure investment fund. On Ukraine, Scholz wants to maintain support, but has raised questions about future funding. The far-right Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD, is co-led by Alice Weidel and Tina Krupala. It has endorsed the concept of remigration, the mass deportation of migrants. It also pledges dropping the euro for a return to the Deutschmark, military conscription and sweeping education reforms. And Germany's Green Party has named the economy minister, Robert Habeck, as its candidate for chancellor. The party wants a billionaire tax to help poorer households through the green transition. It's also in favour of increasing the minimum wage and pushing for incentives to speed up the switch to renewable energy. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Peter Oliver, who's at a Green Party event in Hamburg. Peter, the hours are ticking down. Candidates now making their final pitches.
Yes, indeed. In fact, what you're hearing behind me is a rousing reception for Annalena Baerbock, the Green Party candidate for the Bundestag, but also the outgoing foreign minister in the three-party coalition that Olaf Scholz presided over. There's about to be another big roar because the next person coming to the stage is Robert Habeck, who's running for Chancellor for the Greens. Now, as I said, great reception, but they're really preaching to the converted already here. The biggest issue that the Green Party are facing is that only 13% of voters are currently saying that they would vote for them. One of the biggest issues in this election has been what to do for the undecided voter. 1 in 5 says they don't know who to vote for. And another of the major issues that's been right across all of the parties who have been out campaigning is what to do about migration. Before I came here to Hamburg, I was in Dresden, where I filed this report on just that.
Days away from the most anticipated German federal election in recent memory, migration has emerged as the main topic for voters. 10 years on from Angela Merkel's confident "Wir schaffen das," we can manage this message on refugees, those aiming to be the next Chancellor of Germany are singing a very different tune.
There are, to give you just a number, there are 500,000 within the last 4 years who came to Germany without any control. This has to be stopped immediately to get rid of this big problem in our country in terms of migration.
2 fatal attacks, one in Magdeburg before Christmas and another in Munich last week, carried out by migrants with apparently very different motives, have fired up the debate.
Ending illegal migration and lawlessness, deporting criminals and those who have entered the country illegally, restoring security in public spaces. Quite simply, enforcing law and order.
Current Chancellor Olaf Scholz of the Social Democrats wants to keep a firewall in place to bar the far-right AfD from any ruling coalition. His own party languishes in 3rd place in the polls, well behind the Conservatives and the far right.
Niemals, wirklich niemals machen wir gemeinsame Sache.
Never ever do we have anything in common with the extreme right, because they stand for racism, for misogyny and for getting out of Europe, and because they are the greatest threat to Germany's future.
Dresden is the capital of the state of Saxony. It's also one of the places where the far-right AfD has seen electoral growth recently, with strong showings in the EU parliamentary and local elections last year. It's a similar picture for the upcoming federal election.
Across the country, the Conservative Union have a pretty healthy lead in the polls. But here in Saxony, it's a very different story, where the CDU are running pretty much neck and neck with the far-right Alternative for Germany party. AfD looks set to pick up a lot of votes in this part of the country, which was the former East Germany.
So why does the AfD message go down so well here? The anti-foreigner sentiment seems to have struck a chord.
Because we stewed in the same pot of soup for 40 years in the GDR. The aquarium was too small. You encountered the same fish, and suddenly so many other colourful fish appeared. We are not used to that. Many people have a vague or diffuse fear of it, of foreignness, which I cannot explain.
The AfD is very much in tune with people's wishes when it comes to right-wing radicalism. And I mean, a lot of people have been really against refugees for years, ever since the massive wave of refugees came along. And the AfD is really in tune with that. And that's basically the focus of people's minds.
I'm not against foreigners or anything, not at all. But there are so many now that it's just impossible to cope. They're no longer being integrated. There are just too many. You can't look after the people enough.
With AfD currently on track to take around 34% of the votes here in Saxony and 20% nationally, excluding them from any future coalition-building talks after Sunday could well result in further headaches for the established parties. The SPD, the CDU and the Greens have all very different ideas on what needs to be prioritised. Finding a coalition with enough seats for a majority in the Bundestag may be the most challenging part of this election.
Well, ultimately what we are going to have to see is a whole lot of compromise if we're to get any type of functional coalition government following these elections. At the moment, mathematically and based on who people say they won't work with, the only way it would work would be a three-party coalition between the CDU, CSU as one, on the Conservative right, then the centre-left Social Democrats and the Green Party, who I'm speaking to you with there, all of which have very different ideas on how to handle the important issues in Germany. So hold on to your hats. We might be in for quite a bit more confusion yet when it comes to forming a new German government.
Peter, thank you. Our correspondent, Peter Oliver, and I'm sure that round of applause is for him in Germany.
Absolutely. Well, the cost of butter in Poland has increased by almost 50% in the past year. For a country that uses 6 kilos per capita every year, this price rise significantly hits household budgets. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
These are the finishing touches on a birthday cake prepared in a small Krakow bakery. And butter is a key ingredient. But Anna, the bakery's owner, says she's struggling to keep up with its rising price.
We are trying to find butter with the discount prices, so we don't increase the price and we don't suffer because of the less of the profit. So we're trying to storage it as much as we can, but since we are also a small production, we don't have so many space at the refrigerators.
In Krakow supermarkets, prices have increased to almost $2.50 per standard package of 200 grams. On special discount, those can be found for just under $2. Yet the quality of that butter isn't as high.
This is one of the markets in Krakow where farmers from around the city are actually coming to sell their products. And they are complaining that recently business is slower than usual.
It is here that you can find some of the best homemade butter available, with no additives or nothing artificial.
Before, there was almost a revolution when the butter prices were supposed to go up a lot. That was true then. People were going crazy because of it.
In December last year, the butter price crisis in Poland was so severe, the government had to release butter from its strategic reserves.
The government launched the sale of 1,000 tons last year to calm down the rising prices a little, but as we know, it wasn't a large amount, and it did not change the situation significantly.
The local butter producers say they are not to blame for the price hike.
I think that this is not the result of some extraordinary demand on the market. It's many other countries. The prices of animal fats, in this case butter, have significantly risen. And this is the result of speculative activities on a global scale.
For Poles, this is a bread and butter issue. Aljosz Milenkovic, CGTN, Krakow.
China's Vice Premier He Feng has expressed concerns over tariffs during a video call with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The two sides agreed to keep talking about economic and trade issues. President Trump imposed 10% tariffs on all Chinese imports earlier this month, and China imposed retaliatory tariffs on Washington.
Police in South Korea say they're building a case against impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol over accusations that he obstructed his arrest. A warrant was issued for him to be detained in December after his brief declaration of martial law, but police couldn't arrest him until 2 weeks later after he failed to comply and his presidential team blocked investigations.
Swedish police say damage to an undersea cable in the Baltic is being investigated as suspected sabotage. It's not clear when the fibre optic link connecting Finland with Germany was damaged. Most of the cable and pipeline disruptions have been caused by civilian ships dragging anchors. NATO has boosted its presence in the region since the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead.
Would you get me a medium dry vodka martini?
What
Shaken, not stirred.
What the living daylights is going on with James Bond? A new lease of life means you only live twice.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control, the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Today, China makes 2 out of every 3 of the world's electric vehicles.
The arguments about whether the future is electric are basically non-existent anymore.
What seemed like a blink of an eye, things changed.
The Chinese, they have a 30% cost competitive edge in their sourcing compared to ours.
We must defend ourselves against unfair practices.
We do oppose tariffs. We don't think that's the right measure.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The spectre of the James Bond film franchise coming under the control of Amazon MGM has become a reality. Long-serving masterminds Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson have agreed to step aside, reportedly taking with them a quantum of solace in the region of $1 billion. Amazon will now take on the task of naming a successor for Daniel Craig and creating the next Bond installment since No Time to Die, which was released 4 years ago.
James Bond. Goodbye, James.
Coño. You're prepared tonight.
You can't run. It's too late. It's already crawling under your skin. Don't be alarmed. It's harmless to us.
The name's Adam Solomons, licensed to be a film critic. Adam, good to see you. Why has this happened?
It's a good question. It took Hollywood by complete surprise, and it took much of people like me in the film industry in this country too by complete shock. Why has it happened? Well, it's happened in order to secure a Bond film quicker. Crucially, Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, as you said, the sort of stewards of the Bond legacy for decades, have been dragging their heels in order to preserve the prestige of the franchise. And that has led to some amazing creative decisions and some bold casting choices like Daniel Craig. But it's also meant that we haven't had as many Bond films as some people would like. And Amazon, which now own the distribution rights, would like more Bond films and TV shows and spin-offs. So it's a boring answer, but I think they just want more Bond.
What does it mean for viewers and audiences? I mean, I guess simply more Bond, many more probably every year, or what?
It would probably be a similar situation to when Disney bought Star Wars in 2012. What happened is that before 2012, George Lucas owned Star Wars, and he made the 3 films in the 70s and 80s, and then they sat on the shelves for decades, and he brought back the prequels, which had a mixed reception. What Disney then did was release 3 Star Wars films very quickly, lots and lots of TV shows and lots of films. And what that meant for viewers is that there was more Star Wars, and they were very excited by that. But it did mean that the quality of Star Wars films diminished. And I think we'll probably see something similar with Bond, where we're going to see lots more of it, but is it going to be as good as what we've got used to? Probably not.
What's in it for Amazon, and what's in it for the previous custodians? A shed load of money, presumably?
Just that. So what Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli have done is hand over the creative control. So Amazon already owned 50% of Bond, and they had the theatrical distribution rights. This is creative control. I'll be surprised if it's $1 billion. That's a huge amount for creative control of even a franchise like this. But it will be a very big amount. I mean, Michael G. Wilson's 83, Barbara Broccoli is 64. They're looking at retirement, and they're looking at doing different things. And you know, to some extent, fair play to them. But film critics like me are a bit worried about what this could mean for Bond. So Amazon, they just see money in the bank. It's money for everyone, really, is the motivating factor.
How quickly can you knock these off? Because No Time to Die was released 4 years ago, wasn't it? When are we going to see the next James Bond, and who is the next James Bond?
Well, Jeff Bezos has already tweeted his a sort of open call out on who people think should be the next Bond, and Henry Cavill fans swarmed his replies. So he's a name up there, although I did just check the odds, and James Norton and Aaron Taylor-Johnson are tied top. Harris Dickinson's in there, Theo James from The White Lotus. Josh O'Connor was in there. He's a really good actor. You might have seen him in Challengers, but he'd be completely different. And then Roger Jean Page from Bridgerton, although he is 37, which might be too old. So I think it could be someone young that we haven't even heard of yet. But I think we'll probably have another Bond film in probably 2 or 3 years. I don't think much sooner than that.
Adam, I had another note here saying he's a bit of a male chauvinist dinosaur, but the producer says that was a description of me rather than Bond, so we'll pass on that. Good to see you. Adam Solomons, the film critic.
Thank you very much.
It's already made box office history as the highest-grossing animated film. And now, Ne Zha 2 has sparked interest in Chinese culture, attracting global tourists to ancient sites across the country. Our correspondent Susan Chen explores the mythical hero's origins in Sichuan province.
Heard of Ne Zha? If not, no sweat. Ne Zha 2 is now the world's top-grossing animation. And for now, let's dive into Southwest China and uncover the epic behind this iconic hero. Spoiler-free, I promise. Ne Zha is a mythical Chinese deity, a child warrior with supernatural powers. The second installation of the Ne Zha animation is a modern interpretation of the character through tales of some 3,000 years ago. The film is seen as reaching new heights in Chinese animation, inspiring people around the world to investigate how the legend was born.
Look at this, Ne Zha 2 among domestic animations, I feel like it's pretty much the best. Tracing back to the origin of this legend, I find it quite fascinating and enjoyable.
Here I am, like many others, visiting Southwest China. Many believe Ne Zha's story started here and was passed down by word of mouth. And this is Jingguandong, Golden Light Cave, on Qianyuan Mountain, the temple home of Ne Zha's master Taiyi Zhenren, and also where Ne Zha was trained. A golden statue of Ne Zha stands at the entrance to welcome visitors. People light candles, paying their respects to the boy warrior. So in this cave, we can see statues of Chinese god and goddess, and that is Taiyi Zhenren, master of Ne Zha. Ne Zha 2 director Yan Yu, in fact, visited this temple to draw inspiration for the animated series. And that has inspired visitors to explore Southwest China, even those coming from afar.
We came from Australia, and we watched the Ne Zha 2 in Australia, where getting a ticket was nearly impossible. We came to China on the 14th, and then we visited the nearby Zhouzhaigou. We caught wind of this place and decided to come check it out.
30 years ago, when I was still a middle school student, I ventured into the cave with my classmates.
Tian Dechuan oversees local tourism development.
Even back then, we were well aware of the legend that Master Taiyi practiced spiritual cultivation in this very place.
And he's a fan of the Ne Zha films.
I've watched the movie Ne Zha 2 twice, and there's lots of Sichuan dialect in it. We feel that the popularity effect of this movie has a significant impact on the development of our local tourism economy.
Local authorities say that since the release of Ne Zha 2, online searches of the area have jumped over 450%, and visitor numbers soared 8-fold. But the interest in the Ne Zha legend doesn't end here. Yi Keqing has been studying stories of Ne Zha since late last century, remaining a temple dedicated to the child warrior near the Golden Light Cave.
Ne Zha stories are detailed investiture of the gods, forming the main plots with few changes elsewhere. However, they originate from ancient folk legends in Jiangyou. Ne Zha is first and foremostly characterized by his clear distinction between love and hate, his sense of justice. He has his unique qualities.
And that explains why people around the world have fallen in love with Ne Zha. Xu Xingchen, CGTN, Jiangyu, Sichuan Province.
The headlines again. President Trump threatens BRICS countries with 150% tariffs, accusing the bloc of trying to destroy the US dollar.
Shares in Alibaba jump as the e-commerce giant announces an aggressive push into artificial intelligence.
And 007 is shaken and stirred. Amazon pays more than $1 billion to take over the creative control of the James Bond brand.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.